This is War Junk, the podcast, based on the TV series, produced by Northern Sky Entertainment. Roll the opening.
I'm Professor David O'Keefe.
And I'm history buff and filmmaker Wayne Abbott.
Together, we travel the globe searching for war junk.
Remnants, artifacts, anything left over on the battlefields.
Some big, some small,
All with a story to tell.
and a mystery or two to solve along the way.
This is War Junk, the podcast, with Professor David O'Keefe and me, Wayne Abbott.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, brings back memories, doesn't it?
Oh, man. I haven't seen that opening for a few years. Well,
Wow.
this is, a historic moment for us. It's our
Yeah.
War Junk, the podcast, first episode.
The inaugural show, and it's going to come with all the bumps and bruises and everything else that will happen. Kind of like the first
Yeah.
show that we shot in Hong Kong. How many years ago now? 13?
Well, it was January 2012 that we shot the first episode, and then it aired July 2012 during the London Olympics.
During the London Olympics. Ah, yes. And we were a ratings bonanza.
But, I would say, this was a long time coming. We have a lot of fans out there, a lot of viewers. Our Facebook page is still live, and people are constantly writing every week, wanting, to tell us about a piece of war junk, an artifact, something.
Yeah.
Maybe they have a mystery about their a loved one who fought in the war. So it's about time that we, this seems like a good medium, a good vehicle for us to kind of continue war junk in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, every time I've been doing stuff, book tours or, we've been working on various television shows or I'm doing tours across the country. It's amazing how many people will come up to you and talk to you about the impact that war junk made. It was appointment viewing at Veterans Day up in, Armistice Day or Remembrance Day up here in Canada. People just loved it. And it's still to this day, all these years later, people are still touched by the types of stories that we tell because they're very real and they're very human at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think one of the things, anybody listening here or watching, people do ask, how did war junk come to be? And it was a long process.
Oh, yeah.
Because I remember, we were doing all these big historical docudramas. Black Watch Massacre, Bloody Normandy, Bloody Victory. Then we ended with the Ep. And at this point, we were spending so much time and embedded with World War II and World War I reenactors.
Yeah.
That the first idea was a show called War Junkies.
Yeah.
And we were, remember we talked about it, and we want to kind of follow a group of reenactors. But man, I remember dealing with it, and it got so political. Didn't realize it was so political and so complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful people, but an incredible culture amongst themselves.
Yeah.
Let's just say this, with all its political divisions and everything else. Yes.
Yeah. Once we decided not to do War Junkies, I had this eureka moment at one point, and I took off the IES, and the title came first. And I thought about all the battlefields that we just loved to walk. And War Junk just came out of this idea, why don't we just tell the story of a battle through what's been left behind?
And I guess, it's probably a good idea to tell everybody that the idea with the junk in the name war junk is not because anything we find is junk. It's because at first blush, it appears to be until you actually do the research and you find the human story behind it, then becomes anything but junk.
Yes.
And that was the key. And that's what really hooked me with the whole concept.
Yeah. And it's also, too, I wanted something short, something really kind of a really impactful title that when you're searching through, your remote and you see war junk, it stands out. And it was also, we could have called it war treasures. We could have called it, war relics. But I think we both wanted to attract a younger audience, and that's what the title did. And over the years, it's amazing how many people came back and said their kids, 8, 9 years old, loved the show. We had co-viewing. We had as many women as men watching our show.
Yeah.
So I think the title really helped just kind of attract a new audience. And if we call
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that was one thing that I found really special about the show
Yeah.
was that you would have families watching this together, all generations. And, like I said off the top, it was appointment viewing where
Yeah.
people would say, "Oh my God, there's a new war junk. We need to watch this." And then the families would gather and whatever else. It was amazing. It's unlike anything I've ever encountered in this kind of genre before. Yeah.
And I actually pitched it first as the cheapest show ever because all I wanted was you and I to get on a plane, get in a car, have a camera, and we would show up at a battlefield, spend 2 or 3 days, and do like a half-hour show. And the executive at History TV said, "Wayne, that sounds too much like a travelogue." And I said, "That's what it is, but it's cheap. It's going to be Dave and I, no sound guy."
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then we eventually, of course, kept going back to the executives until they, gave us some money to go and shoot. Remember our first shoot, 2010?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. When we went over to Europe and we went to the Argonne Forest, and that was incredible. That was Argonne Forest in the fall, if I'm not mistaken. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Well, you know what? I have a surprise.
Oh yeah.
I literally put together just a minute or so. This is footage that's never been seen. This was our History Television.
Oh.
And a shout out to Lynn Carter because she was the executive there that really championed
for
it
us.
when some of the executives really kind of battled us. But Lynn Carter really supported us, and we got some development money, and we went over to Europe. And here's mostly you. Because at this point, I wasn't really part of the show. It was all going to be just centered around you. So this is you in France in 2010 when we were, just went over to shoot some stuff to see if we could actually, sell the series. So never before have we shown this.
In this world, there's junk, and then there's war junk.
In this first scene, Dave is standing in front of a giant bunker at Cape Grenade, France.
This is by far one of the biggest pieces of war junk I've ever seen on the Western Front. This is like a 6-story apartment building that we're standing on. There are 4 batteries around here, and each one housed 1 gun, and each gun was 380 millimeters. That's 38 centimeters.
Then we travel to the Argonne Forest, where war raged in 1918.
They're just everywhere. Look at this. What I didn't expect was the frequency of the material that we were going to find. I mean, you go out there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you're coming in with handfuls of this stuff.
Dave and I in this scene go to a recently plowed field and begin picking up pieces of shrapnel.
It's like 3 to 5 pounds, this. Look at the size. Look how this must have come from one giant piece of ordnance. Look.
There was a ton of it laying around, nearly 100 years after the battle.
It's a real testament to the ferocity of the battle.
Very muddy.
Yeah, be careful coming down because not only is it muddy, but there's plenty of jagged, rusted pieces down here.
Dave and I then explore a bombed-out German bunker with extensive damage.
Look at this. This has been ripped apart. Absolutely ripped apart.
So what's this stuff back here? I mean,
well, these are 2 separate storage rooms, it looks like. And you'll notice this is not a fighting bunker, per se, because there are no ports for machine guns or rifles.
it's just pretty beat up.
This is. I'm wondering how safe it is to be in here.
When I was further exploring the inside of the damaged bunker, I looked up through one of the vents in the ceiling.
Where are you, Dave?
I'm up above you.
To my surprise, Dave was peering down.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, look at this. I'm actually outside. I'm right above right now. I found these ventilation holes. Of course, at first, I thought maybe they were stovepipes, but in reality, this is ventilation. So there's no way that was an ammunition bunker. This actually housed personnel.
So how thick is this?
It's about 4.5 feet. Probably reinforced concrete, as you can see down below. So, of course, this is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about, 100 tons of concrete that I'm sitting on right above. And, of course, if this was to give away at any particular moment, you'd be done.
I'm out of here.
Bye.
Is that amazing? I mean, that 2010, you and I just kind of, I don't know, jamming out on the battlefield.
Yeah. 2 guys with the camera having no clue what they were going to do. Yeah, that was good.
But the point you've seen about that bunker, and there is shots of, I guess there's some interviews with me because we had nobody for you to talk to. So we set up that scene and I just started chatting with you. And that's the scene that I remember, I think it was Lynn Carter again, who said, "You got to be part of the show, Wayne." And I went, really? And I've never been in front of the camera before. So that was poignant there with us talking and me going into the destroyed bunker. That was a really important scene. And I have one more clip when we went to the expo. Remember the expo?
Oh my God. Oh yes.
Yeah. I had to blur the guy's face out here because it's been a lot of years.
Fascinating and sketchy at the same time.
Yeah, but you'll see. Yeah. And this was coming up as the first piece of war junk that we actually purchased. And it might, I think, be the only piece of war junk we purchased. Yeah. But here we go.
What are these?
These? I mean,
you have all these helmets, and then you have these things. Well, these were something that you look like you would find in a plumbing supply store. I mean, it looks like something that would be hanging under your sink.
Yeah, these are actually V1 parts.
Really?
They're from the V1 flying bomb.
The V1 flying bomb.
Yeah.
Now, do we know what?
I think they're from the exhaust system.
And where did you find these? Somewhere in France?
No, they came from Peenemünde.
Oh, from Peenemünde, where they were tested and where they were.
That's right. That's the actual the testing site.
So there you go.
Those are pipes from a sink.
We bought
pipes from a sink.
I think it was like 40 or 50 euro for that.
Oh my God.
That's
we laughed our head off after that one. Oh my God.
We really wanted to tell that story, and the show took a different direction, so we didn't go to the expo again. But I always love that. I have those somewhere, and I have to find them. Another podcast, guys, I will find those the one or two pieces we have, and we'll show you. But they did, and they had serial numbers on it.
Yeah, well, interesting. They still look like something you pulled out of your sink, but who knows?
We'll see. It
was. I remember that, and it was fascinating. But there was that sketchy moment when that truckload of weapons showed up from some people who came from somewhere in Eastern Europe, and I've never seen anything like it. They were all World War II vintage German arms, everything from rifles to machine guns to submachine guns. And this truck pulled into the back of the tent. They flipped open the back, and within 5 seconds, it was empty. And people were just dropping down euros like crazy. Then poof, they were gone.
Well, that whole, I think it was called the Cine Expo. It was in the
Cine Expo,
CINEY, and that was just mammoth. I mean, we only show a little bit there, but we were there for a couple of days. But the good thing is we went there, we cut, some of those shots were cut into a sizzle reel. And eventually, that was 2010, sometime around 2011, they eventually said, yeah, okay, you guys can do one show. And we chose, it was kind of a group thing, because I had been to Hong Kong. I got some shots of some of the war junk around, and we have a surprise guest that's coming up very soon. And I met this gentleman, and the network then decided, you guys got to do it on the Battle of Hong Kong. And I remember we questioned first, saying, is the Battle of Hong Kong going to give us anything?
Yeah, 3-week battle. It wasn't there much, so. I mean, the thing is, you saw that earlier where we were in the field around the Argonne, where you're having, they're fighting for 3.5 years. So there is an incredible archaeological footprint. Mm-hmm. It's not the same in Hong Kong, where basically you're getting the fighting which sweeps through there between December 7th and December 25th. So just under 3 weeks. So you're right. The question was, how much or what could there be to find all these years later?
But man, I fell in love with Hong Kong during that shoot, and Hong Kong delivered, didn't it?
Yes, thanks to who our next guest is, or our first.
Why don't we brain? Because I went over there, I think November 2010, to do some research, and my sister Laura Abbott actually was researching and came across online, a digger relic hunter. And I remember I couldn't reach him at first, and I was there for only there for a couple of days, and I was going to the airport, and then finally I got in touch with our next guest, and we met, and then the rest is history. And we came back a few months later to shoot the show. So why don't we see if Mr. Craig Mitchell is there? There he is.
There he is, live from Hong Kong. Look at that. Wow.
Good morning from here, gentlemen. Lovely to be reunited with you both. How are we doing?
Good, man, we're great. It's been a lot of years since we've seen you, Craig.
Yeah.
It feels like history, mate. It really does feel like part of history. So it's lovely to see you guys.
Yeah, I guess the last time we saw you was pre-pandemic, so that must have been
Yes.
somewhere in the western front of Europe. Was the last time I
And time
recall it.
seems to have just been warped ever since. I don't know if I've ever got those 3 or 4 years back. I'm trying to claim them back slowly.
Yeah. But when we first met, I mean, I met you. You were working at the cricket club, right? On the
That's right,
Hong
yeah, but
Kong
I mean, that
Island.
was such a very fortunate position because I mean, that was the epicenter of the battle for Hong Kong, and that happened to be my place of work. So, and again, my job at the time was sort of like outdoor swimming pool and that kind of managing at that area. So it was very seasonal. So in the winter time when the pool was closed and I'd have 2 or 3 months, just on my own, I could just literally step outside my work, and I was right in the middle of all of the battle stuff. So I'm looking on the floor, left, right, and center, looking for any kinds of relics. So yes, it was a very fortunate position, and it was great to meet up with
Yeah.
you. Again, that was a really lucky situation because I think I got a text message or an email like really early in the morning saying, "Would you have time in the next 3 or 4 hours to meet you before you fly off?" I think you were flying off at about lunchtime, so I think we managed to meet up about 10 o'clock in the morning. So like an hour after receiving an email from a random lady in the middle of from Canada, I'm meeting you up there in the cricket club and having a conversation.
Yeah, we met for about an hour. You showed us a lot of the stuff you had. But you've been, you grew up in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah, I was born and raised here in Hong Kong. So um, every weekend from a young lad, I was always up in the hills. I was, very outdoorsy anyway, growing up. So as young as I can remember, I can just remember sort of clambering over pillboxes, looking for trenches. So I've always had that sort of military interest. So yeah, being brought up and raised here, and it's just I'm surrounded by it the whole time. So it just engulfed me. So I'm just taken by the history of this place.
Yeah, I
So
can
when you,
imagine. I mean, one of the things that really impressed me when Wayne was over there first, and then of course we all went over. We met you there, but when you took us to the cricket club, I think one thing that really struck me was standing down there on the field and looking up, and you have the Japanese on one side and the Canadians on the other, and it's only about 200 meters in each direction. I mean,
Yeah.
that was
And
remarkable. So take us back, set
yeah.
us up from that perspective. Tell us what was happening in this area.
Well, the area that we were at, the cricket club, that was basically technically known as East Division. Hong Kong Island had been split straight down the middle into East and West divisions just for easier sort of management and organization. So where we were actually in the Eastern Division, and the Japanese actually landed on December the 19th, very sort of December the 18th in the evening time, sort of midnightish of the 19th. And within sort of about 4 or 5 hours, they were in that area of the cricket club. They made fantastic gains up into the hills and then traversed across the hills, relatively unopposed. There were pockets of defence by the Hong Kong volunteers. They put up a little bit of a staunch defence in little areas, but that was a very, very small area. That was less than a platoon up against, basically nearly a regiment coming towards you. So
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
very outnumbered, and it was basically a bit of a delaying tactic until they reached Wong Nai Chung, which, if you have Hong Kong Island and you drew a pin drop right in the very, very center of Hong Kong Island, that's Wong Nai Chung. I mean, it's smack bang in the middle. To get from north to south of Hong Kong Island, you need to go through this area. So it's a vital position. So that's why the Japanese wanted to get straight in there and do a classic case of, divide and conquer. So that's what the Japanese goal was, to try to get to Wong Nai Chung and then envelop the rest of Hong Kong from that position. So that's why Wong Nai Chung was a really important position for the Japanese, but also for the British, because it was the place where they could get reinforcements from various different areas. So it was a really big,
Move them around.
vital place.
Yeah, yeah.
well, we eventually made it there, but remember where we first met you and the area that we first investigated, Dave, which had to be one of the most incredible and bizarre large war remnants we ever came across, the Shing Mun Redoubt.
The Shing Mun Redoubt, yeah, built to withstand and hold the Japanese for something like 5 months, and it lasted all of 5 hours once the battle started.
Yeah,
Wow.
so why
But
don't we, I
remarkable.
do have a clip. I have a clip
Sure.
that I'm going to put in here.
All right.
So I won't, not just us talking. So this is when Dave and I first come across the Redoubt, and we find it, and I think it's still one of my favorite scenes of anything we've ever done.
We wanted to get into the tunnels to see if we could find evidence as to why.
We got something down here. This looks like it's been hit quite hard. I don't think that's erosion.
So mounted the camera up, got everything rigged up, got the lights on. Just that first dip down into the tunnel was amazing. Here goes nothing. Oh. Wow.
What do you see?
I can't even describe it. It's like absolutely perfect.
Look at the size of this thing now.
And how tall are you?
Well, I'm about 6'4", 6'5". I can actually stand up on this. Definitely battle damage. This has been pounded. It's really amazing though. The rest of the walls are intact. That's the only crack that's in here, with the exception of this being gone. Even with erosion 70 years later, this thing is still hanging together.
Love it. I mean, that is one of the most spectacular remnants. And if nobody's ever been there, I mean, there's kilometers and kilometers of these tunnels.
Yeah, it's something you don't expect to see. I never expected that there would be a fortification that was like that. Now, of course, that's not on Hong Kong Island. That's north in Kowloon, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
North of Kowloon.
It was part of Gin Drinkers Line, as it was called, leading into the bay. But it was fascinating, and boy, did we have some interesting moments there.
It's just so impressive as you walk around. I'll put one more clip on here because this one it really shows the fault of the Redoubt and why the Japanese took it so quickly. But Dave and I bonded a bit. So here's a fun clip out of War Junk Hong Kong.
Having located air vents in the fortress and believing they were a weak point in the design, we decided to run a little test.
So let's see if I can get down here. And I have no kit on, but let's just see.
Oh,
sorry, man.
No, you're bringing the Shing Mun down on me, man. No, you're going the wrong way.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, no, you gotta get up.
I got it. Just let it go. I got it.
Okay, you got it? Okay.
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. Bring it down.
Successful.
A little bit awkward, huh?
Yeah, really. But that is huge. I mean, it was fun, but it's sobering to think that 70 years ago, most likely a Japanese soldier did do that.
Yeah, got in here and then just completely cleaned it out.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Just crazy how big they are.
Even I could have got through that vent, but I would have crushed you.
Let's go, man.
All right.
Adventure continues.
There it is. One of the best scenes in our series. So, but it's a crazy fortification. I mean, the British built that, right, Craig, back in the 30s, 1930s.
Yep. In about 1936, there was a big overhaul of the defense plan, and that was included, as well as restructuring the various guns and sort of coastal defenses. But that was one of the main sort of fortifications that they placed in at that time.
I'm assuming the thinking was very, very much like the Western Front. In other words, we were going to build almost like a Maginot Line, if you will, that they were doing in France, and that we were going to do it there. And then somehow this was going to keep the Japanese back. But of course, it doesn't appear that they took into account that the Japanese were perfecting the art of infiltration when it came to their attack.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy of using sort of the Maginot Line. That Drinkers Line was meant to be Hong Kong's version of it, but it was just the individual pillboxes that were meant to be sort of defending each other. They weren't sort of overlapping. They were a little bit too far away, so they weren't as solid as what we would hope. So once you could take one, it was easy to sequentially just go to the next one and hop along, and that's basically what the Japanese did. So we did have a defensive line, but it was nowhere near as strong enough to keep back 3 regiments of Japanese.
So in other words, when it was designed, there was no mutually supporting fire.
Not as overlapping as we would like. They might just be able to kind of see them, but they weren't as solid.
Yeah. But that was built supposedly, north of Hong Kong to hold the Japanese attack. And man, it's a Swiss cheese fort, isn't it?
Yeah. It's very robust. I mean, the damage that we saw there was actually done by the British after the Japanese had taken it. So when the Japanese had captured it, then what we wanted to do, we didn't want the Japanese to be in there, so we then destroyed it. So when Dave's looking up there and you can see all of that damage in the tunnel network, that was actually done by the British while the Japanese were in there.
While the Japanese were in.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, I
That
guess
makes perfect sense.
we only spent part of the show there, but it's still, if anybody gets to Hong Kong, the secret is if you just
Definitely.
go there, you can walk into it, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping it's still in the same shape. I've been back a couple of times since then, and anytime I go to Hong Kong, I like to visit the Redoubt.
Yeah, I mean, that was one thing that really stuck with me was the fact that, we've seen other tunnels in various conditions on the Western Front, but this one was just absolutely pristine,
Yeah.
all these years later, absolutely amazing. No,
Well,
say
while we
that.
were at the Redoubt, I was going to actually show a clip of Craig's first scene because we had to
Oh,
set him
yeah.
up. Okay, it is
Yeah,
television,
okay.
but it's a fun scene how we introduce Craig in the show. So I am
And
going to
this is
play.
me losing my broadcasting virginity, by the way, right? This is me very first time on the screen.
It is. So this is from War Junk Hong Kong, the first time we meet up with Craig.
Our objective was the observation post, the highest point in the fortress. It's here we plan to meet Craig, a relic hunter and local historian.
Okay, this looks like what's left of the OP up here. Oh, hear that? He must be over here.
As we walk towards the observation post, Craig pops out of the bushes.
Yeah.
Craig Mitchell.
Yeah, you must be Dave.
Yeah,
How are you doing?
good. Hi, Dave
welcome to-
O'Keefe.
Welcome to Hong Kong. How are you
Thanks a
doing?
lot, that's Wayne Abbott.
Hi, Wayne. How you doing?
Good, man.
Very nice to meet you.
So, started without us.
I had to. I'm not going to sit up here fully armed and not get out and have a little dig around.
So this is the OP we're on, the observation post.
Yes, we're standing pretty much right on top of it right now.
And that's it. Welcome to television, Craig.
Good introduction, me bursting out the bush like that.
Yeah, dressed for the office.
That is your office, though.
Oh my
That's
God.
it, me at work, mate, in full operation. Never happier than out there.
I'm just
Everybody.
laughing. Yeah, I'm just laughing. I mean, Wayne and I are dressed for hiking, and of course, you're standing up there in a polo shirt. You got your wristwatch ready.
Yeah.
I'm sure you even had loafers on. It was brilliant.
Well, that was the beginning because we knew, I think, even in that show that once we met you, I probably even knew when I met you the first time that we were going to bring you along to a lot more war junk
Yeah.
battlefields because it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And, to see you out there digging, like we have a few more clips where you're in your element.
Yeah.
I mean, like
I've got some
you've
very
been
happy
doing this for a
memories.
long time, haven't you? You have been doing this for a long time, right?
Yeah, probably, well, over 15 years probably now, since I stopped playing rugby, since I'm getting too broken to be out on the field. So I usually go up in the hills now. So it's about 15 years I've been really seriously into this.
Yeah. Well, before we move out of the Shing Mun, there is one classic scene. In the TV show, it was only about 30 seconds. The network wanted us to take it out, and we said we couldn't because while we were filming at the Redoubt, we had some visitors, didn't we, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you notice when you go to the Shing Mun at first is there's monkeys everywhere. And of course, there's warning signs, don't feed the monkeys. And the question was, how did the monkeys get here? And apparently that had to do with the British when they were building the place. My understanding is there was some sort of insect. So they brought the monkeys in to get rid of them. And then they never got rid of the monkeys. So the monkeys essentially own the Shing Mun Redoubt. They own the area. And, you got to make sure you don't smile at them or anything else like that, bare your teeth. But, generally they leave you alone until.
Yeah. So this is a scene. It's about a minute and a half, but we're going to just play it as is because this was the first edit I did on what happened up there. And I don't think Craig was with us at the time, but this was crazy. It was mayhem. So this is really never before seen, only to a few of us. And every time we get together, we watch this and laugh. But this was basically a scene we called When Monkeys Attack.
Got to tell you, about an hour ago, we were having our crew lunch up on the hill. And normally a scene like this wouldn't make the War Junk show, but it was awesome.
Dave, how you doing?
Well, I was coming up with everything, all the crew lunch and everything else. Suddenly, I could see the bushes in front of me move, and I was swarmed by monkeys. I must have looked like a bloody monkey buffet coming up there. So I just ran and threw everything inside to the OP, and then the fight began.
Because I was inside the observation post shooting, and I had monkeys just in front of me.
Deb started feeding them.
Okay, you want to check?
Oh, shit, man.
And I was using the camera as my defensive weapon.
Holy cow, they're aggressive here. They're gonna come down this way. Grab the food and just hang with me. Hey!
No!
Hey!
No!
But I'm telling you, all I could hear is this man screaming.
Ha! Ah! God! Get out of it! Bang! Ha! Ah! God! Get out! God! God! Move, you little f***ers!
I think for a war junk scene, it might be the best one we shot.
Yeah, when monkeys attack.
Brilliant. That's brilliant, man. What a crazy moment that was.
Yeah.
They are cheeky little buggers, those things.
Yeah, that was 10% War Junk and 90% The Office.
And it started off because one crew member, and I remember earlier, I don't know if we should say his name.
No.
Looked over and he's just throwing peanuts to one of the monkeys, and then when you came up with the food,
oh well, I knew I was in trouble. I had gone down. It was lunchtime, I guess. You guys were still filming. I'd finished. So I went down all the way down to meet the fixer, got them, and I'm carrying, I think it must have been like 3 bags in each hand, stuffed with steaming pork and rice lunches. And so as I'm walking up, this is just wafting, right into China. And so I get up there, and I think it must have only been about 30 yards under where you guys were, but there's a spiral staircase. And so I just took a break, and I'm looking out, and I'm looking at the beauty of China. It was gorgeous, right? The canopy from the jungle and everything else. And then suddenly I'm like, what the hell is that? And I just see
a wobble in the background.
Yeah, I just see everything going like a wave coming at me. And I'm like, I don't know what this is, but this can't be good. And that's when I start to go up the circular staircase, and that's when the monkeys come out and cut me off. And the big one came right at me. And that was the brilliant part. He just looked straight at me and just walked right at me. And I'm looking at him, and I've got all monkeys around. And then finally he makes his move and grabs all the bags that were in my right hand, right out of my hand. And that's what got me pissed off.
Wow.
That's why I came up. I just threw everything inside. And, I was probably saying something like, monkey attack, whatever it was. And
but it was scary when it happened. I mean, there was a lot of them. And it was crazy, but we survived. But so that's never been seen. Only about 30 seconds of that. And I always love, my favorite shot is the monkey with the crispy crunch chocolate bar. Maybe we'll get some advertising now.
All hell breaking loose.
They took our food and everything. So but I'm sure, Craig, you've been used to the monkeys. We're from Canada, so we don't have too many monkeys in our forest.
You learn not to throw peanuts at the monkeys pretty quickly, mate.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, we had to show that because that was kind of the ending of our Shing Mun Redoubt. So we started there in the show, and then we moved across to the island. And what I'm going to play you now is when you showed us some of the artifacts you had already found on the island. There was one in particular that stands out. So I am going to show you this scene, which was very crucial to the whole show.
Sometimes the little things that really get your attention.
Now this, of all the things you have here, this kind of caught my eye because I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. It looks like it's an M, and then I think that's a C, am I right?
That's right, yes. It's been broken in half and it's a little bit bent, so...
What was it?
I believe it is half of a Royal Army Medical Corps shoulder flash.
Royal Army Medical Corps?
I believe it came across the top there. I found it not so far away,
Where?
just over there, just by where that petrol station is, just over there, not too far away.
So what do you know about it so far?
I've narrowed it down through a little bit of research to maybe about 5 or 6 individuals who I think it could have come from.
Well, that would make sense because there weren't a lot of Royal Army Medical Corps.
There would have only been a handful in this particular location.
Wow. 70 years later, this is pulled from the ground. So if you've narrowed this down to 5, you haven't been able to go any farther with the research?
That's as far as I've got so far.
Now, this is what War Junk's all about. This is a mystery that needs to be solved. So with your permission, we're going to take some photographs of this, and we're going to send it back to our research team, and then let's see if we can actually take this little piece of war junk and put a face or a name to this.
Anything you could uncover on that would be wonderful.
All right, that's what we're going to do now.
Be wonderful.
Fantastic. That's where
So
it all started. Yeah.
That was our first personal artifact that we followed up and investigated.
About the size of your thumbnail, and it just led to this, unfolded this amazing story.
How long before we filmed did you find that artifact?
Probably about 3 years.
3 years, that
So
much? Huh?
it's probably been sitting in my drawer somewhere like that for about 3 years. And in fact, I can actually remember the story because I found it and I didn't realize exactly what it was. I thought it was actually just a piece of shrapnel. So I just kept it and I just left it in my box. And then a couple of years later, I was researching like a Japanese manual, being a dork that I am, about artillery shells and how to recognize Japanese, fragments and stuff. I was, I've got a box of like unusual bits of shrapnel. I'll go up and clean it up and see if I can identify it. And then as I'm cleaning what I thought was going to be a bit of rotator band or a bit of thread or something like that, the words, lettering started to come out. And I'm like, hang on a minute, this is a little bit more significant than I thought. So again, it'd been in my box for more than a year or two, and I didn't even know what it was, and I just randomly pulled it out to give it a little bit of a clean, and then and then this whole story just came about. So it was amazing.
Wow.
No, it truly was. I mean, because it probably is the smallest. Like even all the shows we've done, this was maybe the most insignificant piece we ever found, and it's only a part of it as well.
Yeah, seemingly insignificant. And
Seemingly.
And that's the beauty of the show. That was the beauty of what we did. I mean, something like this, and I always tell this story because I was not sold on the show. I was not sold on what we were doing because I really didn't know what we were doing until this. And the entire story just got me. And I can't explain why, as a historian. I can't really explain, except there is something emotional when somebody takes something like this, which is very tactile, and connects to a family story or history. It's amazing. I've never encountered it. Can't explain, I've encountered it. Can't explain it, but it's powerful. There's no doubt about it.
It is. I think we should leave on this note. And then our second podcast, we're going to pick this up, tell the story of how we solve the mystery behind the shoulder flash and a few other scenes from the show. But this has been fun.
It was a tearjerker. It was a tearjerker at the end there when, well, we don't want to give away too much, but there weren't many dry eyes at the end of it, was it?
No. And we also, in the next podcast, will actually show you one of the first pieces of war junk we find in the field, because that was part of the show as well.
Yes.
Is to get permission and dig in certain sites and uncover it. So I think for our first podcast, guys, for the first war junk, the podcast, I think this was great. And we're going to leave it on this, a little bit of a cliffhanger. So anybody listening out there, we want you to write to us. We have an email, just warjunkpodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to our Facebook page, which is just War Junk. Write us. We want to hear your stories. You might have a mystery artifact. You might have a story about a loved one who fought in the war. Yeah, reach out. Maybe we'll have you on when we start to ramp up more of these podcasts. So anything to end on, Dave?
Just basically that, this is a lot of fun sitting back and reminiscing now, and it's great to see both of you guys. And Craig, what a surprise this has been. And I mean, it's nice to end off on we're sort of searching about now like we were doing back then, except there are no monkeys, and that's good.
That's good. Okay, guys, we'll be tune in to the second podcast, and you'll find all about how the first show, the pilot show of War Junk in Hong Kong, turned out. Thanks for listening.
This has been War Junk, the podcast, hosted by Professor David O'Keefe and me, Wayne Abbott. Special guest, Craig Mitchell. Please write us at warjunkpodcast@gmail.com, and you can watch the podcast on our YouTube channels, War Junk the Podcast and War Junk TV. This is a Northern Sky Entertainment production.